Let's now look at certain concepts in the axiomatic context. Axiomatic means what are the fundamental presuppositions of this area? Axiom is something which you take as something fundamental and for granted. You usually don't put a why to it. And if you put a why to it, you usually don't have an answer. You accept that as a pre-existing truth of reality. Something in philosophy, we call it a priori. So let us look at the axiomatic context of psychotherapy and more particularly psychoanalysis. So the first axiom that we proceed with in psychoanalysis is this: we view the mind as a secular system. Meaning, we are not looking at mind which is influenced by spirits, which is influenced by some religious rituals, which is influenced by some mystical forces in nature. We look at mind essentially as a secular system, as a very scientific system. We also view the mind as an independent interacting system. That it is, we look at mind not as something transpersonal. We essentially look at it as something independent. We acknowledge certain transpersonal elements, but we don't see mind as an entity in a larger whole where there is a hub and spoke kind of model. We don't look at mind of an individual as, let us say, what Hegel would say, a specific expression of the absolute. We don't look at mind in that sense. We look at mind as an independent system. So the mind of an individual is an autonomous, independent system, of course, interacting and learning from the environment, created also in interaction with the environment, no doubt about it. But in a fundamental sense, the mind is an independent secular system. So once we say it is an independent secular system, we don't accept that there is something called the spirit of the age in an objective sense, although it may be there in the cultural atmosphere, but not something in a concrete Platonic objective sense, and our mind being an expression of it, that there is something called a larger absolute, and the individual's mind expresses in some way a small part of the larger absolute as the absolute wishes it to be. So there is no authority above the mind. The human mind does not have any authority above it. It is not a part of a larger organic whole which has an intention of its own. So the first axiom that we proceed with in psychoanalysis is to view the human mind as a secular system, as an independent interacting system. Now, the exceptions are, there is a transpersonal element which is coming into psychoanalysis from two directions. First, Carl Jung brings in the concept of the collective unconscious. And in that concept of collective unconscious, we get a transpersonal element. Transpersonal meaning something above the individual. So there are two ways of looking at the mind. One is to view the mind of the infant as what is called in philosophy tabula rasa, a plain sheet. And the second way of looking at the mind is to say that constitutionally mind brings with itself certain characters, certain traits, certain entities which shape the mind further. And when you stretch this argument further, you have transmission of knowledge in potential, experience in potential to the next generation. So Jung brings in the concept of collective unconscious, where he says that the heritage of mankind is passed on to us through our collective unconscious. So every generation unknowingly passes on to the next the experience necessary for the survival of the next, evolution of the next, and progress of the world. So in the collective unconscious is something which is not peculiar by virtue of our experience. It is not in that part of our mind because we experienced it. It is there by birth. So the tabul rasa concept approach says that whatever is there in the mind is because of our experience in the world. And the mind we brought into this world by birth was a plain sheet on which experience has written in 100 ways. But the Jung's approach of the mind is not a tabul rasa approach. It says that by birth, there are certain entities we carry on, we bring with us what he calls the collective unconscious populated by archetypes. We will see that when we get into Jung, but for the moment, suffice it to say that this brings in an element in the human mind which is not there because of what the individual has experienced. This is supra-individual experience content in the human mind. So this is a content in the human mind which is not because of individual's experience, it is there by birth or because of something which has nothing to do with conscious experience of the individual. Neither during the infancy nor as an adult. So these elements we call transpersonal. Elements which have not to do anything with the experience of an individual, but they are supra to the individual's experience. So those transpersonal elements can be of 2-3 different types. Jung talks about something inherited by birth, where the experience of the human race comes into our mind through our collective unconscious, which has the heritage of mankind in essence. And the second transgenerational element which people have discovered now through study of other mammals, genetic study of other mammals and behavioral study of other mammals is that in certain rats, when they were made to fear certain things, that fear got transmitted through genes into the coming generations, which had never seen behaviorally the parents behaving in a particular way. And this brings about an idea that maybe certain psychological elements can be passed on through the genes. So there is a second route of transpersonal through the intergenerational transmission. So there is a cultural transmission and there is a genetic transmission. And then we have the parapsychology aspect of it, where transpersonal acquires a different meaning. We'll see what parapsychology is all about, and I'll give you some videos to get a familiarity with the area of parapsychology, because some very interesting research is happening in that area. And that has the potential to alter radically the way we think about human consciousness and human mind. So these are the first two axioms, that we see mind as a secular system, as an independent interacting system, and we try to factor in the transpersonal largely through the biological intergenerational. Jung's ideas of the collective unconscious are still not at the center and still are too much in the controversy. They are not taken as established ideas. Then we come to the third axiomatic constant, and that is psychoanalysis focuses essentially on the phenomenological investigation. Like any secular science, it leaves ontology and teleology to philosophy. So let us look at what these words mean. Ontology is a part of philosophy which goes into understanding the genesis of anything. That in the roots, how has something come to exist? And obviously science cannot deal with this question. For example, how does a mind operate? You have many answers in psychology and psychiatry and neurology. But if you ask the question, why should the mind exist in the first place? Now, this is the kind of question to which we cannot deal with in science. We can only take the position, I don't know. But if you say that I am not satisfied with the position of I don't know, even if I cannot experimentally find out, I still want to know it in what is called the world of words. So what cannot be dealt with empirically can be still dealt with philosophically. And that inquiry takes us into ontology, the study of the roots of anything, the genesis of anything. So this is one extreme, the genesis. From how does something emerge? We don't know in science how something emerges in the very elemental sense. But we focus on the middle part, how it works. So there is this one end of genesis, then how it works, and the other end of purpose. Why is it working in a particular way, towards what goal? That again we leave to philosophy. So the study of goals is what is called teleology. So both these extremes, the one extreme of genesis and the other extreme of goal, we leave it to philosophy. We focus on the in-between of the how. We don't go into the philosophical questions of ontology or teleology. So if you ask how the mind operates, that's our area. But if you say, why does the mind exist in the first place? We don't know. If you ask the question, what is the purpose towards which the mind is working? Again, the answer is we don't know. So we are not knowledgeable about purpose or genesis. We don't even deal with that area. We leave it to areas of philosophy to deal with genesis and the ultimate purpose. So the third axiomatic part is we are dealing with the phenomenological science. We are not dealing with ontology or teleology. Some concepts we'll have to understand before we go further into our discussion, because we'll be using them again and again. We'll use the principle of determinism. So this is an axiomatic thing psychoanalysis believes in, the principle of determinism, that there is a cause-effect relationship. Right? We don't have any phenomena for which we cannot find a cause, or something which is out of the realm of cause-effect relationship. So nothing is out of the zone of causality. Everything that we study is within the zone of causality. So this is the first principle of determinism. Now, determinism can be of various types. First, you can have the situation of monodeterminism, that effect Y is because of one cause X. You take more sugar, you eat sweets, and the sugar goes up in diabetes. It's one-to-one relationship, that I eat more sweets today and my sugar goes up. Multideterminism. Effect Y is because of A and B working together. So I eat more sweets and I do less physical activity and my sugar goes up. I have done both these things which increase my blood sugar. I have eaten more sweets and I have not done exercise. So the final effect is sugar has gone up. What are the two causes? Cause 1, eating sweets. Cause 2, lack of exercise. So this is a situation of multideterminism. One event happens because of two different causes happening together, and they may be contributing 50% each or in different proportions. Maybe because of maybe the increase in my sugar is 70% determined by my eating sweets and 30% is because of lack of physical activity. And it need not be two, it can be several causes which may be contributing to creation of one event. So in psychoanalysis, in psychotherapy, essentially when we find situations, we very rarely find a monodeterminism. Mostly we find multideterminism. That a person is depressed not only because of one factor, but because of a variety of factors. A person is anxious not because of a single factor, but a variety of factors. Rarely we find situation of monodeterminism. Mostly we find the situation of multideterminism. That the same effect is generated, that the effect is generated, the final result is generated because of a variety of causes working together, each contributing proportionally, and the proportion is different for each cause to the final event. Then we have a situation of overdeterminism. Overdeterminism is a special kind of multideterminism, where we say the same final event is created by a multiplicity of causes, but the causes are such that they can together cause the event, but even individually cause the event. Meaning, I am depressed because I lost some people in my life. I lost quite some amount of money. I lost my job and I'm finding it, no, I don't feel I'll get another one. And I have had very difficult experiences with my parents. Now, all these factors can together act to result in depression. But even if you take one factor alone and you convert all other factors to zero, even that single factor has the potential to create the depression, the final event. Take the example of diabetes again. Eating of sweets can lead to high sugar. Lack of exercise can lead to high sugar. High amount of stress can lead to high sugar. Erratic lifestyle can lead to high sugar. So all of them can together create high sugar, multideterminism. But if you regulate all these factors and allow only one factor to operate, even that one factor can lead to diabetes. So let us say eating of sweets is not controlled. Everything else is controlled. Even that single factor of eating of sweets still has the potential to raise sugar. So overdeterminism means it is a multi-determinism situation where each of the factors has the potential to unilaterally cause the event and also together work with other factors to cause the event. And more often than not in psychotherapy, we find situations of overdeterminism. And then we have free will. That once we say determinism does not mean there is no free will. Of course, we accept the free will. And that is where we work through. It's a very important element of working in psychotherapy and psychoanalysis that a man has free will. It may be influenced by the unconscious, but the person can decide for himself to come for therapy, to work on himself and slowly work out his way from the strange hold of the unconscious. So we also accept that there is a free will. The free will is not completely free. It is still under the influence of the unconscious, but there is a free will. Some extreme Puritan psychoanalysts will dispute this and they will say the free will is not really free because it is in the under the influence of the unconscious, but no one will dispute that there is a will. Because nobody will dispute in psychoanalysis that there is a capability to reflect upon the unconscious and decide if or not what is happening unconsciously is in our interest or not. Because one of the principles of psychoanalysis is reflecting, not acting. So reflection is critical, fundamental to psychoanalysis. And largely, most schools in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy largely proceed by founding themselves on the philosophical foundation of materialism. Very few, like Carl Jung, are open to idealism in different forms or spirituality in different forms. So it's almost like a 80-20 situation. 80% of players, therapies, leaders in the area essentially subscribe to materialism. Few of them subscribe to idealism or spirituality. Now, this is the axiomatic position of psychotherapy, Western psychotherapy in general, and psychoanalysis in particular. Certain important developments are happening which are yet to be factored into this classical position. And these developments are what I have put in the grid. First, contemporary research, contemporary studies of consciousness have raised questions about nature, location, and action. What consciousness is? The classical position has been, it is an epiphenomena of the brain, that somehow the biochemical responses, reactions in the brain create this thing called consciousness. So consciousness is not something special apart from the biochemical process of the brain. It is just one of the outputs of the biochemical process, a special kind of output called epiphenomena, but still an outcome of the brain. Now, recent studies have put a lot of questions on this way of thinking and have created questions like, what is the nature of consciousness? And we have to spend some time here on this. Usually, people associate awareness with consciousness. So if I am not aware of my unconscious mind, people say it is unconscious, but it's not really unconscious. All the psychological phenomena are happening there. So how can it be unconscious? So a better word is subconscious. Conscious, but below the level of my awareness. But everything is happening in the unconscious mind. Love, hate, thought, emotion, everything, desire, frustration, anger, guilt, everything is happening. All these phenomena are phenomena of consciousness. They cannot be phenomena of inanimate matter. And therefore, it's not proper to call unconscious mind as unconscious, although we use the word because of convention. Subconscious is a much better word. Because phenomena that we believe require consciousness do happen in the unconscious mind. So it's not unconscious, it is just conscious in a different way and outside of our awareness. So first question is, what is the nature of consciousness? And people who had rare experiences of the spiritual nature have come to report that consciousness is very different from what we understand it to be. And it seems that we are consciousness with a body. We are not consciousness created by the body. And that alters very fundamentals of the way we look at ourselves, the human mind, and reality. We will go more deeper into it when if we get time, we will discuss sometime the nature of consciousness when we deal with Sri Aurobindo's approach to consciousness and the Vedic approach to consciousness. So when we get into the Vedic approach to consciousness, we get a very different definition of consciousness, and it is not synonymous with the conscious mind of human being or the aware part of human being. Because you can see, even in other mammals, there is language, there are emotions, there is a society, there is a hierarchy, there are individual relations, there are group relations. There is love, hate, envy, jealousy, everything. So they also have the same phenomena that we have at a much lower level in a different way. So they also have something that we have. And therefore, they also have consciousness, although they don't have a human brain. So it's very clear that consciousness is not product of human brain. The same thing exists in lower mammals also, in reptiles also. And much lower down the chain also we see psychological activity of the type that we understand. Activity of love, of hate, of belonging to a group, of group conflict, of individual conflict, of hierarchy, of domination. All these are psychological phenomena. And they exist at times even without the nervous system. And this creates the idea that a human brain may not be necessary for consciousness. A mammalian brain may not be necessary for consciousness. And taken to its logical conclusion, maybe brain itself is not necessary for consciousness. And if that idea is explored further, we get into a very different territory. So for the moment, I will leave this point half discussed here and move on to other concepts. We'll come back sometime later if we get time to reflect upon the nature of consciousness and the philosophy behind it. Location of consciousness. Where is it resident? Normally, we believe it is in the brain. Now people have started believing that it is not in the brain, it is spread out in the body. So the consciousness as we know it seems to be more spread out in the body. And what we say gut feeling, maybe there is actually some processing there. And there has to be some reason why so much of serotonin, which is a very important neurochemical, is produced in the gut or is related to some gut function. And then people also talk about experiences from parapsychology. There's something called remote viewing, where a person tries to see something which is beyond our visual sense, and precognition, trying to know something before. And this raises questions about where is the consciousness located? So the location of consciousness, and people are not talking about non-locality, the non-locality of consciousness. And that creates very fundamentally different opinions and outlooks on reality, on human mind, and on consciousness. And the third is action. How does the consciousness operate? So we have a conscious operation, we have a pre-conscious operation, we have an unconscious operation. But then people bring out a psi operation, parapsychological operation. And we'll see when we get time how that raises questions on the classical view we have about consciousness. And then the nature of reality. That is there some design to nature? Is there some purpose of human mind? Are we hardwired into certain things? Or are we just born as a blank slate on which society writes its own program? So researches in the area of quantum physics, parapsychology, extensive literature and experiences of people in Indian spirituality, psychedelic experience is very important, and reincarnational research, they are bringing out new material which are challenging our standard classical views about consciousness and nature of reality. So these are the first 5 points are the classical axiomatic position, philosophical position, or let me say the philosophical accepted assumptions with which we work, the axiomatic foundation of psychoanalysis, and new research coming out in the area of consciousness and nature of reality, providing us with completely new insights which are challenging our classical position. And all these areas are very interesting areas. I will refer you certain videos which discuss about these developments and what impact they have on the human mind, let me cite an example of reincarnational research. Ian Stevenson has done extensive reincarnational research, and I think he has something like, I may be wrong in the number, but I think something like 1200 solved cases where somebody reported something which could be thought of as reincarnation, where the person started remembering in early childhood something of the past life. He was taken there and he gave information which only that person in the past life could have had. And extensive documentation has been done in a very scientific way by Ian Stevenson, and his work is carried forward. And today one university has started giving a course in reincarnation, which 20 years back would have been a blasphemy. But the research is so rigorous that university has started giving a course. And I think this is a beginning. This might get more studied and more accepted over a period of time. And one of the outcomes there would be that if this is true, right, and of course, we put the if there. If this is true, then some of the characteristics and what we call constitution of the present life may have an impact of past life. And in one of the research studies, one of the cases, Stevenson talks about correct me if it is Stevenson or it's or the person who is carrying on Stevenson's work. I clarify later, but the case is this. The documented case is a person has some difficulty of some sort of paralysis and is very dependent on others. And his past life analysis shows that he was tired of working in the past life and he wanted to have a life of dependence and a life of not doing anything, and therefore the difficulty. Now, we don't know whether this is scientific enough, rigorous enough, or are we sliding back to the dark ages, but keeping our flames of rigor alive and the scientific spirit alive in openness. If we see it and if we find it true, then I think over the next 5 years, we will have quite some reworking of the fundamentals of the way we approach the nature of reality, the nature of human mind, the nature of pathology, and the purpose of healing and the nature of healing. Any questions?
Till now, everything is clear. I'm having difficulty in certain terms, but I think by the course of time, I'll get
Yeah.
used to them.
Yeah. Just let it flow. The terms will unravel themselves. Let me know what terms are you finding difficulty with?
No, not difficulty. Actually, they're new to me. That's
Right. Okay. Just let them settle down and mature. They will reveal themselves. They'll become familiar over a period of time. Dhruval, how about you? This is heavy stuff.
Yeah, sir. I'm getting it gradually.
Acha. Okay. So let us start with the concept of healing. How we see the concept of healing in psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, in modern medicine, and in holistic area, and how we approach healing. This shows that we have 4 minutes left. So let us take a break. Should we take a break for 10 minutes or you think we should continue? Dhruval, do you need a cup of tea or should we continue?
I am okay with it, whatever you suggest.
Honey, should we continue or should we take a break?
I'm okay if you continue. I'm okay with it. If you continue.
So I think let us take a break of 10 minutes. And let's the new link. After
Okay.